that's been asked of me is how many net spaces is really going to be lost in this garage. Number one, how many spaces do you have now? Number two, how many spaces will you have after you remove that one level of parking? Number three, how many of those spaces are going to be committed to construction workers of the Park Grove project, Coconut Grove Bank employees, other employees from the building, people related to David Martin's enterprises. So the question is, how many actual spaces will be publicly available at that point, after that point? And then once you build the additional commercial space up there, how many of those spaces will be required for those businesses there? Second question is, how many secure bicycle parking places will you have? You know, it's great to say, oh, put a bicycle rack, put a pipe or something, and somebody puts a lock on there, which gets cut. The commander isn't here, but he'll tell you that bike locks get cut all the time. So if you don't have secure bicycle parking, it's worthless. And I get a lot of complaints, especially from Brickell, that there are an insufficient number of motorcycle and especially motor scooter parking spaces in these garages. And please.
All right, I'll let Victor speak to
the answer to this question is there are 400, facts that I've been provided is there are 402 spaces in the garage currently. There will be 402 spaces left in the garage on a short-term basis.
What's that?
After short-term floor?
Short-term is how long?
Until the redevelopment of the garage occurs, okay? And that's not going to happen right away. Now, after the redevelopment of the garage occurs, there will be 300 parking spaces in the garage. The garage use is being preserved. You asked how many of them are going to be for our construction workers. 0. When this issue first arose, you know, we don't control directly, unless we assert the control, where people park. And yes, some of the construction workers working at Park Grove were parking in that garage. And when that concern was articulated to David, he instructed the construction company to get their workers out of that garage. That's why the supply is opening back up in that garage. Didn't have to do that, but he did it because it was the right thing to do, because he is part of this community. As far as the office space, yes, you have zoning, but it's very important for you to understand the difference between required parking and the way parking is commercially leased. The zoning requires you to provide a certain amount of parking spaces. The utilization of that parking depends on the tenant and what kind of tenant you have. If it's a commuter tenant who's going to come from Kendall, or all his employees or his or her employees are going to come from Kendall, yeah, they're going to need parking in the garage to sustain the office use. But the reason we're building this garage, and the reason we're interested in this facility, is because they're building this inventory of residential adjoining it. And I can tell you, I live it. I told you, I live it every day. I live south of 5th on Miami Beach. I moved there because it was a place like Coconut Grove that I can walk to a restaurant, I can walk to where I work, I can walk to a park. And I think that's when I read your Grove 2030 vision, I think that's the vision you have for the Grove. And you say you want a sustainable mix of office, retail, residential, so that people don't view this as just a one destination to drive to, park their car, and then leave. But rather a community that you live in and a community that is sustainable, so it has all those kinds of uses. How many of those parking spaces will be used on a daily basis by the people visiting the dry cleaners? I can't tell you. That's dictated by consumer behavior. How many of the people are going to be visiting the tenant, whether it's the doctor who puts his law office there, or the lawyer that puts his doctor that puts his medical office, or the architect that may want to rent an office there. I can't tell you, but that's why we're building the supply, so that there's sufficient parking. And then we're going one step beyond, because we've been asked to do that, and making a commitment that during the peak hours, because we know there's a concern, and there's been a lot of misperception about what our intentions are about this development, to make the commitment that at least 10% will at all times during the peak hours, which is generally what we've been told by the parking experts, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, that at least 10% of the inventory
How
will be
many
available.
spaces is that? 30%? 30?
Mark, your question.
That's dedicated. The rest of it is all publicly accessible. If there's 300 at any given time, there's going to be 300. There may be 100 on a given time. At 3 o'clock on an afternoon on Friday, there may be 150.
Yes, Mark Coleman, Coconut Grove Park Homeowners Association. I have actually several questions. One, I guess the first one is, if this parking garage hadn't been sold, this opportunity hadn't come up, would the parking down, I call it the Scotty's parking garage and the Gata parking, would that have been built?
Private parking would not have been funded by us. Now, whether the city stepped up and funded it, I don't know, but that certainly wouldn't have happened with the proceeds from this garage. So I can't speak to whether it would have been built or not. Would the Bayshore project have been built? Yes. Yes, because we're getting a substantial contribution from the developer, and we would have borrowed the money for the balance of that. Outside of that project, nothing else that we've discussed here in terms of projects had any certainty in terms of resources.
Okay, but I think, the city was going to build the Gata parking spaces from some other fund, so now we've got funds that are being.
Why would you assume that? That's a pretty long assumption. I've been in government for a while now. Even though I'm on the outside, I'm looking in, and I'm telling you right now, there was no certainty that was going to happen. As a guy on the inside, engaged in those conversations, I wouldn't bet too much on that.
Other than that, it seems like, we're taking the funds from this parking garage and spending it on a parking garage that would have already been funded either by you or something. So saying, the $12 million or whatever is $12.8 million, I think is proceeds from selling this garage, is all being spent.
15.2.
Is that the net after you've got the $2 million that's going back to the bid?
No, that includes the bid contribution.
But that's not being spent on parking, that's going for sidewalk improvements.
Yeah, okay, just for parking.
Like
Okay.
12.8 years ago. So part of that is now going to the parking garage that we've already built. So yes, the funds are technically staying here, but if this parking garage, let's say, was sold a year from now, or 2 years from now, that parking spaces and stuff would have been funded from other sources. So we're sort of playing a little bit of a.
So is it a question? Because I'll give you a perspective on it. So timing is everything, by the way, and you know that in every part of our aspects of our lives, right? So we had an opportunity with regards to the sale of this garage, almost perfectly stride for stride in conjunction of, we were at the very beginning of a major development push in terms of parking for the Grove, right? So we just took advantage of that. And by the way, I go back to what I said earlier. If I had the opportunity to not have to borrow and incur debt and actually leverage it, I'm going to take that option every time. It's just good, sound fiscal policy. So that's the perspective.
Another part of the question is the 720 new parking spaces that are being built below. It seems like most of those are being built down by Gata at Scotty's, and then we have 220 that are going to be built in the Playhouse. So all those 720 are not really in the center growth. So we're taking some parking spaces out. They won't, presumably, they'll still be here. But we're really providing parking. We're taking some parking that we think is not very convenient, and then we're putting parking further away that's even less convenient. Now there will be a collector to take people up there. But it seems like we're kind of moving this parking from here and moving it over there and saying it's a win for everybody. They may need parking down there, but it doesn't really help the city.
Okay, so let me give you the parking guy's perspective again, because that's what I do. I park cars, right? So
Oh, you're a transportation guy.
I am. I'm evolving, right? So then what happens is you have this. If I showed you the Grove right on the grid, and you have all these big red dots of all this inventory that's amassed within literally a block and a half, and then you looked at the inventory everywhere else, right? And in terms of the areas that are growing, because by the way, Commodore Plaza is growing. By the way, the whole south side of the Grove is going to grow. The area in along Bayshore is growing tremendously. Obviously, David's projects are the exception, but even on the commercial side. So when you look at the allocation of parking, how it's distributed, right now, it's distributed worse than poor. It's almost a travesty how it's all amassed in one area. And quite frankly, that's what's created the low utilization. So if I have an opportunity to reallocate geographically and spread it out, number one, I make it easier and more accessible for you to use. I also address that traffic issue and the congestion issue, right? And then we're building a circulator that, quite frankly, is not only going to just connect all the aspects of the grove, but is also going to connect to the metro rail. So when you look at that from a standpoint of transportation, and you look at this issue of people migrating to the grove, we're giving them options now. They don't just have to drive their car into the Center Grove if they don't want to. We're giving them options, and I think those kind of alternatives are, I think, from a public.
Just if you could explain the bid process, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions, I'm sure everything was done perfectly by the book. Question is, and this is for sort of future comment, maybe we rewrite the book a little bit.
Sure.
Could you sort of explain how many times it was advertised, where it was advertised?
So the question is how does the process work? So it can work a lot of different ways. We can have a standard RFP process, but we had wanted to initiate it ourselves. We could have put on an RFP, done solicitation. So what happened in this particular case, like I said, David approached me and I said, we have an unsolicited proposal process, one that we adopted sort of similar to the way the county does it. So he submitted a letter. No, it's advertised once. There's no need to multiply advertise. We advertise it once in the South Florida Business Journal, because that's the market that's going to be attracted to buying the garage. And then the bids are then submitted, right? They're evaluated, right, based on the various components of the proposal. And then a decision made, and it goes back to my board. My board, technically, I have to get approval to advertise. Then I have to get approval to select the proposal. And then I got to go back to them a third time and get them to approve the contract. So that's the vetting process.
Yeah, and it just seems, like I say, this is not to comment so much on the whole process of procurement. I mean, that process seems great if somebody wants to buy, a used police cruiser or something like that. But when you're selling a huge asset in Coconut Grove, you say you act more like a private business in some respects, that a private property owner would have put a big ass sign on the building. There would have been some advertising there, drawn a little more interest, would have served as notification to a lot of neighbors that they weren't notified. We get notified about a lot of stuff, but certainly weren't notified about this. And it seems like, if this was advertised a bit more, you might have gotten more people. And I'm not saying you should have, because I know that's not in your covenants and how you have to do it, but it's more of a comment of, possibly in the future that something should happen when you're selling something that's worth $16 million, put one ad in the South Florida Business Journal and expect to get competitive bids and get the highest amount of money, which is for the taxpayers, which are partners. It's sort of, fiduciary interest or responsibility. So it's just commentary on future processes.
Appreciate the feedback. Grace?
Yeah, hi, Mr. Maria. Could you tell me, please, has this deal closed already?
No.
When is this deal expected to close?
End of November.
End of November.
Correct.
Okay, is there something to happen between now and the end of November that requires, something must happen that requires for the closing to be at the end of November and not now?
It is due diligence. I mean, they're in the due diligence phase still, that's why. I mean, most real estate contracts have a due diligence phase. They're doing sort of their vetting from a zoning and environmental stage, and that's just when the closing was pegged.
Does not need to go before the city commission?
It does not.
Okay. Now, how high, Mr. Diaz?
Sorry?
How high, Mr. Diaz, is your client intending to build once he starts building upwards? You said that you're going to start building.
I think it's, we're eliminating, if I'm correct, and I'll look at Mike if I'm mistaken, we're eliminating one floor parking and adding, placing 3 levels of office space.
It's a net of 2
2
floors.
levels, it's 2 floors, 2 floors higher
Than what it is right now.
correct.
So it's 2 floor up.
There's 1 level of parking that's being converted to office, and then 2, the load structure of the garage will permits 2 levels to be built.
Just wanted to thank you so much.
Yeah, I think you were next in line.
Mr. Marie, do you live in Grove?
I don't, used to.
So what I understood was a lot of this information was based on a survey done of the garage in 2011. Is that right?
No.
When was the last time it was?
You're referencing a study. The basis for the sale is not based on any type of parking demand study.
Well, Sapien has, I think, 750 employees, I believe.
I don't believe it's that many, but they're also not using that many parking spaces, that's for sure. They're not.
Because it's not right. There are a lot of them are young and they're looking at all the cars for transportation. Architectonica, I think, has a couple hundred people next door
Where?
in their office building.
Oh, you mean employees?
Yeah.
Yeah. I assume, I don't know.
Bombard, Navarre Cafe opened around the corner. We were there last Friday night and it was standing room only. And we heard people talking about they made their garage was packed, they couldn't find any place to park. They're not going to go park over on Bayshore Drive at the dog park.
Sure.
This is bought and paid for. We pay some of the highest taxes in Miami because of anything. I don't get it. I don't understand selling an asset that we have waited so long for the road to come back, and it is coming back, and we're going to sell it so that we can build more parking elsewhere when we should be building the parking anywhere. I'm appalled.
Okay, so let me actually address the facts of what you're saying in terms of the use at Mayfair, the use at Coco Walk, and the use of this garage. So let's actually talk data. Right now, even with the repurposing of Mayfair, right now they have 150 excess spaces. 150. So they're not even at capacity yet. They're not.
And you say excess?
Excess spaces.
Have you tried to get in there on a Friday or Saturday night and find a parking spot?
I talked to the parking operator directly and the owner of the property. So I'm giving you actual information. I have no perspective over whether there was a specific instance on one night. I'm telling you in general, they have capacity. Coco Walk, same exact thing. They have capacity as well. On a Friday and Saturday night, you can go to our garage, by the way, and there's 300 spaces available. So in terms of actual inventory and actual available parking, we are oversupplied in that part of the group. Way oversupplied. So I can let you see the occupancy numbers. I mean, we run them, we evaluate them on a regular basis. I know what happens in Mayfair and Coco Walk because we talk. I mean, I have a relationship with those parking operators. The guy who runs Mayfair used to work for us, so I have a good relationship. I know what their utilization is. So it's not an issue of supply and demand. It isn't, by the way. So if I can take a resource that is, quite frankly, underperforming and actually utilize those resources and do other things within the same neighborhood. Look, if I was, and I'll give you a great example, if I was taking the money and I was putting half of it into Wynwood or investing it into Brickell, by the way, you can take my head today. I would be the first one to tell you. But I've been in this community for 20 years. I don't live here, but I've been knee-deep in Coconut Grove for 20 years. So I understand the business environment. I've been involved in 2 different cycles here in the Grove in terms of the market. So I understand what happens here. I'd be the last guy to recommend that we'd sell off an asset if it didn't have a benefit to the Grove, because it is a Coconut Grove asset. And that's the perspective I had on it from the very beginning. So when you talk about actual real use, it's just not there. And so you could fill Mayfair, you can fill Coco Walk, and you know what? They're going to fill at different times. Coco Walk, like I said, is going to get busy at 8 o'clock and at noon on the weekends. And by the way, Mayfair will be dead empty when that happens. So any real high utilization, if by chance they got full and they still don't get full, any of that's no one's going to go to Mayfair or even this garage, because this garage will be empty at night on the weekends as well. From a resident's perspective, this is really a good deal. And I know it's hard to wrap your arms around because people really are skeptics. I understand that. And I'm happy to spend as much time with any individual in this room and walk you through this in a lot of detail. Because quite frankly, I've evaluated this thing from top to bottom. And I'm comfortable with the decision we made. I am. I've got nothing to hide in terms of the process. I've got nothing to hide as it relates to why we made the decision we made. And it's based on actual facts, not based on a study based on 2011. I've got real data. I see our occupancy numbers every day. I know what it's like.
Right here, with extra that here.
Mark, you didn't address the tax money, the garage tax money.
What do you mean?
She asked, this is our taxes paying for the garage.
No, what actually paid for the garage was the big merchants and property was paid for the garage through that contribution. So we're reinvesting really their money, not so much taxpayer
It
money.
doesn't come out of our tax.
No, it doesn't.
So at the end of the day, the purchase price is being paid by Terra, and the bid dollars are being given back to the bid, and I congratulate the bid, because it did the right thing to take 36 and leverage it and commit it to $6 million of alternative transportation projects. I think that's been lost, the fact that they took that money and then helped realize $6 million of projects that you support, projects that all of you have advanced, that came up from the community, and that you have put forward as being the new vision of the growth. You know, as you transition into the kind of community that I read in your vision statement that you want to be, which is the kind of urbanistic vision that I think you are promoting, there's going to be decisions like this that have to be made. And what you need to evaluate is the trade-offs. You know, the status quo is always the easier option. And whenever you change the status quo, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like the change. So then you have to consider whether the overall vision is better for what you're trying to advance. And I just think that, you know, I'm not going to argue parking and occupancy. I don't know. That's why he's here. They made the decision to sell this asset. But I do know one thing as someone that's been involved in this debate, not in this, I mean, yes, in this community at the county level, and very active in the debate in the city of Miami Beach. You cannot build enough garage to accommodate all the cars. That's a vision of that's not an urbanistic vision. You build it and they will inventory it. So your vision, I read it, it's consistent with what any good planner would promote, is to get people out of cars, is to decrease traffic circulation. It's to not make this a commuter destination. It's to create a sustainable, diverse urban neighborhood, which you have. And that will be successful. And I don't think that it's coming back. I think you've always had the core ingredients in the growth of this vision. And what people are realizing now is, you know, I want to live back in the urban core. I don't want to live in the suburbs and have to commute 3 hours and deal with the lack of infrastructure that we suffer from on a countywide basis. So, yes, you're going to have circulation issues in the grove. Okay? Yes, you're going to have to look for alternative means of transportation. We have them in Miami Beach. So I know the debate that you're engaged in, and I know the vision that you're promoting. And no one is ever going to always agree on any change that occurs. Their rationale is their rationale.
Go ahead.
And I think that
Question.
overall,
We got a lot of questions left. Let's move on. Go ahead.
Sure. Sean Steele, I'm the local media resident. I've got two questions, actually. First one, it seems that the new parking spaces, 729 that we referenced, are very wholly dependent upon the circulator to really work well. What's the level of commitment to that circulator? And secondly, the open street parking garage was the designated hurricane vehicle protection garage, 1 or 2 in the grove. With that being eliminated, are there any plans to replace that?
Yeah, so no, they're not entirely dependent on the circulator. The circulator is we'll call a bonus, a benefit to the location of those garages, because quite frankly, the Playhouse garage was served at South Grove, Caldwell Plaza. There's a commercial hub there. The one on Bayshore also is going to sort of serve what I'll call a repurposed waterfront there as well. So they're not entirely dependent on that any stretch of the imagination. Now on the MVP issue, it is a designated, what we call, for those who don't know, we have a MVP program which allows people to park their cars in our garages during hurricanes. So I'll let Victor speak to what the interim plan is in terms of making that available. And our intent is to make the 2 new garages both available for the hurricane program, as well as all of our downtown garages, which are currently available now and have a lot of capacity. We have a lot of capacity for that program in a pretty strong, close proximity. So I'm not worried about the sustainability of that program. The people who park there now are going to continue to have access to a garage to keep their cars safe.
All right. So, Art, I consider you one of the smarter guys in the city. You know, you're certainly smarter than most of the morons over here at City Hall.
I don't know how high your bar is.
Well, you know, it's high enough to ask you this question.
Okay.
Given that you're so smart, Why did you do an RFP that didn't include for any provisions to protect the parking, the public? Because he said at the beginning of this process that, well, no, we don't have any provisions in there. We're talking about it, but we've made no, we didn't have to make commitments because there weren't any commitments required in the RFP.
Sure.
So, being somewhat of an expert who pulls the cover back, there are a lot of RFPs that get written specifically with the intention of providing an opportunity for one particular individual or one particular company who's going to get the job, so to speak. So that's question number one. Question number two is, you did a survey, what do you call it when you send somebody to figure out the cost of the building? Appraisal. So did you appraise the air rights to that building as part of the appraisal?
No, because there really aren't much in terms of air rights available there. It's a low density project, so there's no real value in the air rights. He's adding 2 floors. I wouldn't consider that much of a air rights footprint. Now the appraisal valued 2 things, right? Existing condition, which is valued at about half of what we would be getting, and what in essence is highest and best use. And it took into account the opportunity to add a level of parking or office, which is ironically an idea that somebody had come to me almost 5 years ago on, and he reminds me of it every day once these guys proposed that idea, because he actually proposed it to me about 5 years ago, because the garage was performing so poorly. So yeah, the appraisal is based on really what the market will allow from a highest and best use. Now, let me speak to the issue of why we didn't put a restriction in there, okay? There's multiple reasons why. First and foremost, and I'll go back to the very key part of my discussion throughout the night, it's sort of a constant fabric, we're oversupplied in parking in that particular area. We are. And I knew that whoever bought it, by the way, at the value they were going to pay for it, because you wouldn't pay $16 million for the land value for that site. They're not tearing it down, because ultimately you can't build enough there to justify $16 million land value. So they were going to keep the parking. The economics of that deal, no matter how, you don't have to be, to have an MBA to figure this one out. You really don't. If you're going to buy a parking asset, you're going to use it as a parking asset, because that's part of the value. So David's never going to shut this thing down to not make it available to the public, because that's how he's going to make money. Because how you make money in parking is you turn spaces. We have a terminology in parking, it's called turning spaces, right? The more times I can turn a parking space, the more valuable it is to me. So I don't care if I have an office user, by the way, or a retail user. I'm about turning spaces. And monthly occupancies, I'm going to give you an interesting stat citywide. So when we sell monthlies, we always oversell them. You want to know why? Because the actual utilization in most places is no more than 60–70% of those monthlies ever in the garage at any one time. Because we have equipment that monitors how many monthly cards come in and come out. So we always oversell. And I have garages that I actually have oversold, and they never technically reach capacity, because we're good enough, we're smart enough to figure out how to read data, right? So in this particular case, I knew, 1, he's never going to shut the garage down. 2, we have already had an oversupply of parking in the garage. And 3, I wanted to get the highest value for the garage, because I wanted to be able to leverage it. That was the rationale that went behind not putting a restriction, because I knew it would lower the value of the garage.
Okay, but let me get back to the air rights. Air rights can change. City Commission can tomorrow say, well, we want to put T24, T36 in.
But nobody values a property based on
potential.
They base it on real estate.
No, I understand what I'm saying, but that's a possibility.
Sure,
I mean, across the street, they're building a big condo, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be more than 5 stories high.
But the zoning already existed.
Well, exactly, but there is, we live in a strange city where things like this happen.
I know, but from a value standpoint, you can't do
No,
that.
but just one more short question. Over here at Regatta Park, you say you're going to redo Part 2. How many parking spaces are there now, and how many parking spaces will Part 2 create in addition to the spaces already there?
Where we're building now, because the park itself took up a lot of what was there before, I mean, obviously, because none of that was used. That was all Expo Center parking. I think we net out there in real parking, because I don't even know what's real parking there anymore. I think there's actually usable about 70, 80 spaces there now, all of which are in horrible condition. And the new inventory will be 120, plus some convertible spaces that'll be used for trailers.
So you're paying $1 million for 40 spaces?
No, we're paying $1.3 million to actually have a lot that isn't a trip hazard
Well,
and
I'm saying,
and a
but
problem for
you-
people.
you're increasing
One
by-
lawsuit can take care of that $1.3 million.
You're increasing it by 40 spaces.
Roughly.
Fine, okay, all right.
Art Thorne Grafton, architect, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
I think one of the biggest disappointments is the loss of public parking.
Sure.
You know, this is now going to transform into market rate parking. The rates are going to be considerably higher. And I think I'm a little confused that MPA certainly recognized that public parking is needed in the road because you're getting ready to build parking at kind of 2 new goal lines. And this parking garage that you're taking out is really at the 50-yard line. So there's a question of distribution of public parking, which is now going to be, we're going to have, that's missing. It's going to be missing in the future. We're going to miss that great public parking garage in the middle of the working district of Coconut Grove, where all the offices, apartments, retail.
What do you think makes my parking different from Mayfair?
I believe it's the rates.
Not really. So the hourly rate, the transient rate is less, and not by a huge factor, it's less. The monthly rates actually aren't, by the way. Ask Arquitectonica. By the way, they rent all of their parking for their building in Mayfair. And why? Because it was cheaper. So, and that's a reality.
Hourly rates.
Hourly rates aren't. But by the way, again, that's based on demand. And I said that in the beginning. It's low because we haven't had any utilization there. I couldn't charge anymore if I wanted to because ultimately I'd drive more traffic out of the garage. Parking rates are demand driven. Remember, parking is a commodity. It's not, it's like, it's the problem I have sometimes. It's like renting space, renting retail space. It's an issue of supply and demand. What the market will pay for it, that's what we charge. In downtown in Brickell, it's the same way, by the way. Parking for a city is a city resource. The inventory, the actual space is one asset, but the other asset, it's a commodity. It's a return on the investment. And so parking, unlike some sort of other city services, like, you might pay less for waste service, right? Or the ability to use a park, like I'll give you an example. So we're about to engage in an agreement with Miami-Dade County. We're working on it to actually manage their parks, their parking at their parks. And they have always treated almost their parking as an entry fee. That's how they sort of handled it, which is actually kind of absurd because parks ought to be free, by the way. The only thing you should be paying for is the fact that you're driving a 3,000-pound piece of steel into the place and you're going to park it somewhere. That's what you should be paying for. So they want to change the shift there in the paradigm, and we're going to actually help them with that. But parking ultimately is a commodity for them. The way they see it, use of the park is free. But they want to make money off the parking because that, quite frankly, is a commodity. Like I said, it's a luxury, so to speak. Not so much a luxury. But look, I get that the perceived public loss of space, you're not losing space. The space is going to still be open to the public, and ultimately we're building a lot of inventory. And you got to weigh that balance between, do we want to amass all this parking that is way underutilized within a block and a half of each other? By the way, which is poor planning, or do we want to better serve the whole grove, right? And actually spread that inventory out a little bit. And that's just a decision I feel comfortable with as the guy who parks cars.
And the other issue is the timing. To pull the trigger, in advance of having these other 2 facilities built seems to be quite a risk.
Again, the Grove Bay project is on the pretty imminent horizon. Regatta Park lot's going to be built, start construction in January. The only outlier, and I will absolutely agree, is the Playhouse. And quite honestly, I wish I had a better way to fast track that. But I'll tell you right now, the Grove won't ever let that project be fast tracked. Why? Because it's a political hotbed. Because there's a lot of big issues that have to be addressed with that project. Historic preservation, ultimately the size of the building, all of those things. And so that project just inherently is going to be a slow-moving machine because it's controversial in a lot of ways. So I wish it was faster.
Your question here, and then Mark had a quick follow-up. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. You said that you're getting rid of the streets because of underutilization as far as the parking spaces. Is this a precedent setting thing for the city, or what do you do to avoid something like this happening in the future, where you build a building and then the spaces aren't used and then you have to ultimately sell it?
Yeah, look, it's not I wouldn't say it's a precedent-setting thing. I think that at the time we built the garage, if those of you who are here realize it was a different dynamic with CocoWalk and Mayfair, an entirely different place in terms of their business model. And quite frankly, it just didn't work. And I mean, like properties get, sold off and they end up bankrupt. It just wasn't a project that worked. We repurpose properties all the time. I think just from its highest and best use. I think public parking is inherently, as a commercial entity, a lower use on that scale. But I think from a standpoint of how we solve that problem in the future, I think in this case it worked out because we got to actually get value out of it and use that value in other areas and not take on debt. So, I mean, all of those things, it didn't hurt the city at all, by the way. The city paid, city benefits, and the Coconut Grove community benefits
How
tremendously.
much did that cost to build it?
The garage actual cost, $10 million, and we're selling it for $60 million.
Yeah, Art, you've made several comments that, that parking garage is going to still stay as parking, maybe not public parking, but private parking. And Victor, you've also made some comments about keeping at least 10% of it as, hourly parking, I guess, open to the public. My question is, and this is really directly for your client, is he willing to put a restrictive covenant on the property that requires a certain amount of it to remain as public parking?
We have proffered a condition of the contract, what we've offered you here today. We proffered that to the MPA.
Now, that's a little different than a restrictive
Yeah,
covenant.
you're correct. There is a difference, and I've given you the direct answer.
Because-
We've offered to put it into the contract with the MPA as a condition of the sale.
And have they accepted it?
But
I think they're just waiting for,
Waiting on the number.
But I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Obviously, is once you consummate that sale, and 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, and you decide to tear it down or close it and say it's all private parking, only monthly parking, stuff like that. I mean, a condition of sale is not really something that anybody can hang their hat on. Only really restricted covenant would be something that would be operable and would assure the community that what you guys are offering and what you're saying.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a perfect example, the Sonesta Garage, right? Which was built, allowed them an increased FAR on their building, and then it was a predetermined that they had through a restricted covenant to keep the rates at the ordinanced meter rate, our on-street rate.
That's why
Right?
that was $1.50.
Okay, have you been in that garage
in there
lately?
tonight.
Have you been in that garage lately?
Yes, $1.50 though.
And it's a disaster. Right, okay.
Well,
So it is.
But
I mean,
I parked in
the
there
physical
tonight.
condition of that
That's the
garage,
parking rate.
but the physical condition of that garage is horrible. It's a liability. I've dented my car in that garage. It's not well lit. They've had all kinds of issues with theft in there. So be careful what you ask for. And so I didn't put a restriction on this in terms of public availability because I knew we were building more inventory and I understood what the current demand was.
I know why you wouldn't want to put on it because it
Yeah.
would affect the value of the sale, presumably.
Well, I understand why he wouldn't either. He doesn't want to
But
restrict
now
himself.
everybody's saying that we'll keep 10%, but maybe it only lasts for 5 years or something like that, but at least maybe that would bridge us until the parking is built for the Playhouse, or we have some assurance that that other parking sort of comes online.
We'll discuss that actually.
but so that it's clear, and I think, again, I'm not a zoning lawyer. I'm not here, I'm here, I'm a trial lawyer. I do commercial work. I'm here speaking to David. I don't know the logistics of the engineering and stuff like that, but I will tell you this. I listen, okay, and I educated myself a lot before coming here to speak in front of an audience, not knowing that I was going to be taped and not caring, quite frankly.
What's a public meeting?
The fact is that what Art articulated to you is the reality. The asset itself dictated the use. I mean, you're not going to buy you're not paying $16 million for an asset that costs $10 million, for a structure that costs $10 million to build, and then demolish it because the footprint, the land value is not that. So if we were talking about a large piece of parcel that had this enormous development potential as alternative uses, yeah, the MPA could have imposed a restricted covenant on all of the bidders. because this was a competitive bid process. Now we're in a contract to buy it and contract it for a price, and we are making commitments, and we're willing to proffer that by way of contract to the parking authority. So the issue of restrictive covenants affects property values, and it's like saying to you, I know that you paid X millions of dollars for your home, but I want you to put a restrictive covenant that you're never going to remodel and remove this one tree that I have that I like the way it shades my adjoining garage. That is a big ask. And I know that you understand it, and I think that it's important. You know what, I think it is important that you raised it. It's a valid question. It's a very valid question. And the fact that you know the difference is important, because we need people in the community to know the difference, but there are not private use of subsequently private assets. You could have not chosen to sell the garage.
But that's done.
But that rationale has been
That's
given.
done all the time. I mean, there's a restricted covenant on the Shell gas station that we were involved in. CVS wants to come in and build there. A restricted covenant that our homeowners association has some say into what they do there. So, but if all the way you say is it's going to remain a parking garage and there's no danger of being changed or something like that, then the imposition of the restricted covenant shouldn't be much of a burden if that is truly the case.
The restrictive covenant is forever. It runs with the land.
It can be for, it can run
The
for 5 years.
restrictive covenant is always about, the restrictive covenant is an encumbrance on the deed. It is always on the land. It is not something, believe me, when I tell
Let
you.
me moderate this.
It can run for.
You
Let me
can
moderate this.
have-
You guys literally could be at an impasse here for the next 20 minutes. So here's what I'll do. Here's what I'll do. Because I've had this discussion with David. I will sit down with David and I will see if he will commit to giving that allowance for a very short period of time till we get the other facilities built. I'll try to do that. No guarantees that that's going to happen, but I'll
I
try.
think it's a reasonable ask. I don't think it's.
And as I said, we proffered the sales amendment, and if that's what Art asked in return, that's not for me to decide. That's for David to decide. And as I hear you articulating it, what you're saying is you're concerned that they won't complete the projects that they're telling you that they're going to build. And you want to be able to make sure that that vision comes online before the loss of the public parking
It's
space.
just sort of to give the public a little bit more comfort that there's a transition. I wouldn't say that restricted covenant will only expire when they build the parking, but I would just say, hey, it lasts for 5 years, whether they build the parking or not, it at least gives a transition period. It gives a little bit of comfort, and I think it's not, a huge imposition if it is going to indeed stay a public parking garage or a private parking garage.
I hear you, like I said.
I know David's a reasonable guy, so
Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's a valid point that you raised, and we'll take it back.
So, let me just interrupt for a second. I promised Art that we'd be here about 45 minutes instead of about 2 hours. So,
He should know
if
that.
you have a question, if we can wrap it up really quickly, and one more question, and then maybe that's it. And then, just great with email.
A couple of
Email.
quick staccato bullet questions, if I may. My name is Steve Smith, and I'm a real estate guy for the last 10 years. How many units are being built by David Martin? How many residential units?
I know 900 fewer than the zoning permits.
Yes, no, I mean,
But-
staccato question.
First of all,
Yes on it.
I'm going to answer your question.
Thank you.
I don't give information that I don't know. I know that the number is 900 fewer units, first of all, that is allowed by the zoning. Michael, at Grove at Grand Bay, how many units are being built? 97. And what was the allowable zoning? Do you know? Okay. At Park Grove, which is not a David Martin development, so I want to be clear so that we don't misrepresent the facts to everybody. That is a joint venture in which a Terra affiliate is involved. How many units are we building on? 260 and 3 towers. And how much was the permitted total units? What?
260 and 97.
So just in that one project, there's only 260, even though there were 900 units under the existing zoning code. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Second question is, and I have to disclose, I have a vested interest in equity in real estate that surrounds it's the immediate environs of the playhouse. So I'm delighted to hear what is being promised what if the new dollars are that are going to go towards the playhouse per se out of this transaction? And how-
$6 million out of this transaction.
6 million new dollars.
New dollars, another $3 million out of the bid.
The county says it has $20 million allocated for the playhouse, let's say a year ago, inclusive of building a garage. Now it's 26 million.
No, their $20 million has nothing to do with the
No,
garage.
okay,
It's
it's
only
20
the
million
building.
plus a new
Correct.
garage.
They never allocated any money toward parking.
It's 20 plus 6 plus 3 from the bid, so it's 29.
Okay, great, that's good to know, I appreciate that. Just a quick comment, if I may, and that is, we're all delighted to see the Grove coming back to life. Many of us in this room watched the Grand Bay go up, a few of us did, and we watched it come down to and go up again, so that's good, that's the Grove, that's progress. But we talk about the use of parking now, and as a real estate guy, we talk about value and use when we do appraisals. The value and use of this garage 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago was pegged on the then usage. If we're adding 200-300 units next door, and the average person that's buying a unit in there is $3 million, what about the staff that's going to be, are they all going to be taken care of on site and all the daytime usages, there's no incentive? It's purely philanthropic and because Mr. Martin has now decided to be in the office development business, those are the motivations, if I may, I know it's a very important question.
It's a loaded question. It's not philanthropic. It's obviously a private endeavor. So let's be honest about it. But no, it is not an ancillary garage for the Park Grove development. That is not why. This is a project that our partner in Park Grove is not a part of. This is a project that David envisioned that he Terra affiliate is doing on its own. But it has nothing to do with the Park Grove. The required parking for Park Grove is being provided on Park Grove, not only for the residential, but also for the retail and also for the new headquarter banks for Coconut Grove Bank that are going there. So that is not the purpose of what motivated or drove this project.
Super. Congratulations to everybody.
Thank you. I'm sure this picture, art, I'm sure you can ask a question to them as they